Hey, this is Andy Powell of Wishbone Ash, and you're listening to the Total Kit Car on YouTube.
Welcome to the Kitcar History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff, a lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved and what happened to them. Hi, welcome to the Total Kitcar YouTube channel. My name's Steve Hull, editor of TKC Mag and totalkitcar.com. And I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Total Kitcar History Files in association with Enwin Motors. Once again, this is recorded in very early 2024, and I again have to apologise for my Darth Vader wheeziness. I've just got over a chest infection that's left me sounding very wheezy, and I've left a little bit of a cough. So if I sound like Darth Vader and I cough, I do apologise. But we need to get videos out there, and so I hope you put up with that. This time I'm really pleased to be talking about personally for me, one of the finest Cobra replicas that I've ever driven, from a great mark called CRENDON Replicas, and a smashing chap, founded by a smashing chap who passed away in 2023, sadly, although he hadn't been very well for quite a while. His name was John Kerr, written Kerr, K-E-R-R, but known to all and sundry as John Kerr. I really liked John. He was a smashing chap, redoubtable chap, and you knew within seconds where you stood with John. If he didn't like you, he'd make it pretty clear. And because he was a straight talker, he'd probably tell you that as well. But as I say, with a bloke like that, you knew where you stood straight away. And I'll use the old cliche: he didn't suffer fools even for a second. And he was also so fixed and so adamant about how his cars should be. I think you risked being dismissed with a red card if you asked John if he could put a stereo in your dashboard. Or perhaps the worst one would be to suggest that you were thinking about putting a Chevy V8 in a CR427. You probably guess from what I've said earlier, just a few seconds ago, that the response would be pretty negative. He always said that it was verboten to fit a Chevy. You had to fit a Ford, and preferably you had to fit a big block FE427 7-litre engine. If it's a side oiler with a top loader gearbox, that was more brownie points for you. But John he wasn't dictatorial with that. I mean, he wouldn't demand stuff from his customers. He just did it in his charming, gentle way that had you eating out of the palm of his hand. Because he was very sincere, and if he liked you, he really liked you, and I think he really liked me. And I'm proud of that. And I got on ever so well with him, and he'd often phone me up. Not so much in the latter years of his life, because as I said, he wasn't very well. But he'd often phone me up, and he'd never be afraid to tell me off. But I go back to what I said about you knew where you stood. And it was always forgotten. He'd say his piece. He'd call me a few names. And then we'd be best mates again. And usually I couldn't argue with what he'd nailed me for. So, and I liked him for that. He was a charming chap. So I think customers wanted to achieve the best. I think everybody sets out with that intention to achieve the best result with their kit car that they can. But in John's case, I think they were delighted to just follow his lead and what he suggested, because they believed in what he was purveying, and clearly he knew what he was talking about when it came to Cobras. So therefore they seemed to to follow his lead quite happily. He developed a great relationship with a company in America and probably sold them a lot of engines in the UK called Southern Automotive, run by the Parhams, and they are charming people, absolutely brilliant, come from Georgia. I'm not sure if they're still in trading, but they were till fairly recently, and they knew, certainly the old guy Bill Parham, who sadly again passed away a few years ago, even though Susan was running, his widow was running the company. What they didn't know about FE427 engines wasn't worth knowing, and so therefore John developed a great relationship with them, and his customers would often end up importing an engine from Southern Automotive. But when John had his career before, he's an engineer, and he'd started out in the kit car industry by offering a build service for the Southern Roadcraft 427, and he built some beautiful examples of that car, and inevitably he decided to do his own thing, and that's how the Crendon CR427 came from. The name Crendon is often speculated, I think, but it was nothing more than the industrial estate where he was based in, or the area where his industrial estate was in Aylesbury, and that's it really. Some of the best Cobras I've driven came out of John's workshop. Incidentally, he presented a beautiful car for demonstration purposes. If he respected the journalist, which I don't think he respected many, and I say that for no other reason than that being the truth. If he respected the journalist, he would present you with a great car. He would also be very, very keen to get your feedback. He wanted racing driver levels of feedback. He was confident in the way he'd engineered his car, and he would meticulously, and you were invited or expected to pay attention, because, as I said, he used to phone me up if I'd done something wrong and you hadn't taken your notes. He would be look at that really with disdain, because ultimately, if you're a motoring journalist, you're meant to write about cars and to make careful notes, and that was it as far as John was concerned. But anyway, and he'd always present the car. So if you came back in the car and said, "Oh, that was great, John, really like that," he'd call you a name probably and say, "Well, that's no good." And he actively would say, he said it to me a couple of times, "That's no good to me. I want to know what the car's really like. I want to know what it did under heavy cornering. I want to know what it did under braking. I know the engine's going to work, but did it work okay?" Because he wanted to know if there was a fueling problem. He lost respect for a lot of journalists very quickly if he didn't think they understood. If you mentioned something, he'd like you to mention it to him, and he'd like to have the chance to put that right, because he wanted to make his cars better. And that's admirable, but that's only how he thought it should be. And I think that's quite synonymous with life lately, because I noticed that back in the old days, when you phoned a gas board or electricity company, that you expected good customer service from any service provider. Indeed, you just expected good customer service and professionalism. I think these days, when you get customer service, it's notable for it being good. So John wanted to give good customer service and give his customers the best possible experience while building their cars, and indeed while enjoying them. And that's how John was. So I had some very enjoyable times with John and in his cars. He had opinions on most things, and he was always good company. It was always good to go up the pub with John and have a pie and a Coca-Cola or something. It was very good. He was a fiendish driver as well. He had a couple of, I do remember this now I think about it. I'm remembering as I go along. He had a couple of the E30 shape BMW the 325 Tourer, and he'd been playing with those straight six engines, and he drove them like he stole them, and he was a very, very accomplished driver actually in those. Anyway, I do remember when I was approached by a TV company, a satellite TV company, in the early noughties. I think the program was called Dream Cars from memory. One of their episodes, they wanted to cover. They were the same company that had produced A Car Is Born, and that series of programs. And a couple of years later, they were looking at doing something else, and this thing was called Dream Cars. So they covered a dream car or perceived dream car every episode. If it was still in production, they talked to the manufacturer and obviously owners. And this particular episode, they approached me to put forward a Cobra manufacturer. And I just happened to know and had just happened to have driven John's new demonstrator at the time. And also, and I find it unforgivable, I cannot remember the customer's name, a very nice man who, it must have been a good car because John said it was a good car. And every Crendon I've ever seen has been great. But this one was particularly great, and I even think at the back of my mind this one could have been one of the only, if not the only one, with an aluminium body, so it was particularly special. When I approached John, he was over the moon. But as a man that could sometimes see a cloud in a silver lining, he had his doubts about TV companies, but I persuaded him that it would be a great thing. What he didn't want, and what he was worried about, was getting TV coverage and being flooded with orders. He didn't want to become a commercial churn them out operation. He wasn't interested in that. As he pointed out, he was a one-man band. He did everything himself. His dear old dad used to help him, and I think until he died. So he was a nice old fellow as well, I remember. So that's what he didn't want. He didn't want a load of orders. He didn't want to be a Pilgrim or a Dax. He just wanted to be Crendon churning out 6 to 8 cars a year at a push. But I persuaded him that it would actually be a tribute to the work he'd done, a tribute to the mark, the fact that he created that from a standing start. And hey, this guy's car was fantastic, and it was fantastic because of the kit that you'd supplied to, or that John had supplied to him. Anyway, he agreed. The customer was very happy to come along. I can't remember. I can't even remember what that. We met at a stately home somewhere. It's a long time ago, and a lot of cars have gone under the bridge. We had a great day, and the presenter was Amanda Stretton, who I really, really respect after the way she, not only she's a good presenter and she's very knowledgeable about cars, but she was just a lovely person to deal with. I really liked it, that experience of that. So I was, as in-house expert, was asked about the Cobra replica movement. I was asked about Crendon, and then they spoke to the Crendon owner. John didn't want to be on camera. He had to be persuaded. I think he was. I think that program, you can still find repeats of that episode all these years later, I think, somewhere on some channel. And it worked out really well, and it was great. And John got a lot of publicity. And of course, he turned orders down, and he didn't want certain types of orders. So he was very picky. Anyway, when John decided that the time had come to move on, retire, he wanted to say, I do forgive me, I'm in praise of John here because he was a wonderful gentleman who I was privileged to know. And I forgive me if I'm painting him in a picture of some sort of grumpy James Robertson Justice Actor type of character. He was actually a lovely man, but he believed in what he did, and he believed in the product, he believed in the mark, he believed in what he created, and so therefore he wanted someone similar to take over. I remember him telling me that he was thinking about it. He was feeling that he needed to move the company on, but he didn't want to advertise it really, because he didn't want any Tom, Dick or Harry. He didn't want anyone to waste his time, and he didn't want to waste anyone else's time, and he had to be confident that the man was right. Now, I'm here to tell you that the person that took it over was right, and John would be looking down now, very proud of what that man, Anthony Hale, has done. He's respected. Don't want to embarrass Anthony too much, but he knows what I think about Crendon, and he knows what I think of the job he's done with the Crendon mark, and I think that's rather great. So John was very pleased to hand the reins to Anthony, and Anthony has, and again, not wishing to embarrass him, but I mean, he's built some, if you want to see, there are some fine Cobra replica builders in the UK. Dave Brooks springs to mind, and Anthony Hale is another one. I mean, he's built some breathtaking cars, some AKs. I think he built some Daxes. I think he's built lots of AKs, and I think he's built pretty much most of the other major, at least once, replica Cobra makes. But he took over the CR427 even project back in, I think it was late 2016. He'd already been running a company, his own company for building of other cars called Absolute Horsepower down in Wellington in Somerset. And he's always been a fan of the American muscle car and the Cobra in particular. His background actually lay in civil engineering, but he's always had a talent for building things, I think. Modifying cars from about the age of 17, if I'm not mistaken. I think the fad was sticking Rover V8s into anything they could fit them into, and I think Anthony told me once he fitted a V8 into a Toyota Hilux pickup. Interest in aviation, an interest in all sorts of things that he does very well. But that kind of squares the circle, I think, of the Crendon. This is a nice short but sweet tribute to Crendon past and Crendon today, really. You'll get the same treatment from Anthony as you got from John, and you're going to get an equally beautiful product. If you get the chance to look at a Crendon CR427, please do so. It oozes class. It shares the same sort of body shape, obviously, as other Cobra replicas, and many of which of those are brilliant. But if you just take a little look at a Crendon at a show, if you get a chance, it's underpinned by a tube steel ladder frame from Seamless CDS. Anthony has streamlined the production process. John was stuck in his ways in many ways, and he didn't want change for the sake of it. But Anthony has streamlined the production process, and it's now easier to build, I think. You can have a rolling chassis, or turnkey minus, as American friends call them. You can have a body kit, you can have a chassis body kit, you can have what you want. I'm not sure where Anthony stands with the Chevy Verboten idea. Best to ask him. I'm not sure, but I still think he prefers a Ford. He'll probably entertain. I mean, John would, if you wanted a 351 Windsor Ford V8, he would entertain that. He did like the Cleveland, which is not so well used in the UK, but he did like the Cleveland V8, Ford Cleveland. I've driven a couple of Crendons with a Cleveland in, and that's a nice engine, as of course is a Windsor. Anything with a V8 is a good one. And of course I drove at least 2 with FE427s. And one above everything else, I mean, CR427, it offers just pure driving skills. It's a planted car. It feels like another cliche incoming. It's created out of granite, but without feeling overly heavy. It's a proper driver's car, I think. It'll be a companion to you. And that's why I've noticed one thing with Crendon owners. They tend to not only keep the cars, they cherish their cars. And you don't, obviously, in terms of volumes, we're not talking Pilgrim or DAX 427 levels. But you are talking a quality motor car. Anyway, that's all for this episode. And I hope you've enjoyed listening about the Crendon and John Kerr and Anthony Hale, the past and the future of Crendon. If you haven't already done so, if you please consider subscribing to the channel. It doesn't cost you a penny, but you will be notified every week we try and publish one of these little history file videos, and you'll be notified in advance of I don't know what the term is. I can't say publication. That's a magazine term, which I'm very fond of. Launch public. Well, anyway, when it drops, that's the one. When it drops, you'll be notified in advance. If you could, on the way out, hit the like button, because that helps us get into other people's feeds, other car enthusiasts. So that will be appreciated. And I'd really just like to say thank you for giving up part of your day to visit our humble little channel. And wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is, day or night, rain or shine, have a great day. Thank you for visiting, and I look forward to welcoming you another time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joel Mutton, and you're watching the Total Kit Car YouTube channel. Ding dong.